Do you yearn for the stars? Is living on another planet high on your bucket list? Do you feel like there could be so much more to humanity if we could agree to mostly be nice to each other? Are sentient machines and parallel dimensional spaces a boon for you instead of looming dangers? I might just have the setting for you. Let's find out more. Welcome back to Veiled Fury Entertainment, and today I am joined by the woman of the hour, Tracy Sizemore. Tracy, thank you so much for joining me today.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm honored to be here on your every 5-year cycle of doing these.
Yeah, I should probably do this a bit more often, but yeah, well, who am I telling this? There's so much stuff to do and only so few hours in the day to actually get to anything. And yeah, kind of the
For
interviews
sure.
kind of fell off from the table. I don't know if there's an English expression for that. But yeah. So I wanted to call this episode "The Road Not Taken" because there is a science or like a proto science fiction short story, I should say, with that name.
hmm
I don't know if you know about it.
I don't. All I remember is the Robert Frost poem, so I don't know that I've heard of the sci-fi story.
Yeah, that's not. This is not a poem. It's a really, really old story, and it's about how everybody else in the galaxy develops interplanetary travel at some point, and humanity never does. And because of that, humanity develops into what we know as humanity today, as our high tech. And nobody else has that because everybody else develops interplanetary travel, and then they basically stop developing the technology further and just pump all the development they can do into making their interplanetary travel better or faster. And
hmm
then an interplanetary invasion force lands on Earth, and they step out of their ship with muskets
hmm
and attack Earth. And because they're like, oh, cool, there's a civilization right there. They don't even have interplanetary travel. So how advanced can they be? And then they step off their ship in
Yeah.
Central Park, if I remember correctly, form firing lines like in 1776. Yeah. And then the US military does US military things.
Sure. Awesome. Yeah. No, I've never seen that one.
And yeah, and then I realized that's actually kind of a horrible title because, well, what I want to do today, why we are here, is you've been answering so many questions about Han Cluster in so much detail that it was really hard for me to pick stuff that hasn't already been answered. And I don't really
hmm
like to be the guy who repeats the same thing for the third time that has already been said. So I thought we would
Understand. Yeah.
approach this from a slightly different approach. But well, I'm checking my show notes here. I'm already getting ahead of myself and mixing things up as I want to be. So, to introduce my guest, for the folks who may never have heard about her, and to all three of you, welcome back from under the rock you've been spending the past few years. I hope you had a lovely vacation there. Tracy Sizemore of Manifold Savage Worlds fame, most recently the Designing Problems podcast, which she's co-hosting with the most velvet voice of Savage Worlds, Christian Serrano. And yes, I am going to die on that hill. And then, of course, the big topic of today and why we are here, the Han cluster. So you are going to publish the Han cluster setting under your own label, which is pronounced how exactly?
It's called Eid Soul Media. So it's phonetically it's EED, and soul is based on the sun, and
Mhm.
then media or games, right? Eat Soul Games. Eat Soul Media is like the parent of Eat Soul Games, but yeah. So that's how it's pronounced.
Nice, good to know because I remembered hearing you talk about that it's not pronounced Edie Soul, and then I was like, oh, okay, but I can't remember how it's pronounced. So I thought
Yeah.
I just ask.
It's okay if you get it wrong. Like it's for me, and it's something unique. I wanted something unique, so there you go.
Hmm. And that's fine. Yeah, and it's not like it's that far away. Like having a silent E in an English title for something that's not unheard of.
No, I can break rules because I'm speaking English. It's okay.
That's a joke I hear so many English-speaking folks make.
Yep.
It's really funny. So yeah, what I want to talk about today is, of course, the hung cluster, but from a very different perspective, and that perspective is what isn't in it, and how that made what is in it better. Because, well, as a writer myself, I know designing things and I know designing processes. To a degree, I'm still mostly winging it, but I guess that applies to everybody to one degree or another. And killing your darlings is a thing that's in for designing games, in writing novels. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to dive into what didn't make it, but how Han Cluster came out better because some things didn't make it. So I'm just going to go back to the very, very early days, and that's when I realized something like you and I, we operate on two different ends of a spectrum. Because I do mostly cyberpunk, and cyberpunk is like known for being this super bleak stuff, and everyone hates each other, and it's like the crab mentality. You can't get up because I can't be with you, so I'm dragging you down again. And then there's you and Han Cluster, which is optimistic sci-fi. And if you guys don't know what optimistic sci-fi is, yeah, you can watch literally any other interview with Tracy. She does a great job of explaining that. And it is literally what it says on the tin. So how did that come to be? What made you decide to write an optimistic sci-fi setting? And was it optimistic sci-fi from the beginning?
Yes, it kind of was, but it was. I think it was a decision based on partly who I am, because I have this very strong sense of long-term optimism. I believe at some point we're all going to figure this out, and I still believe it, even after everything that's going on. But short term, I can be a little bit of a pessimist. So I think of in terms of like tomorrow. Well, things are not going to work out for me tomorrow, but eventually the human race is going to figure this thing out. And so that's part of what influenced it and why it was that way, because I can't help myself, but also because so many games are about sort of going after people that you oppose or hate, or things in that way. And I think that over time, Han Cluster developed in a way that there's still conflict. There's still people you're going to fight, but it's not so much about dog eat dog or getting ahead in terms of making the most money, or killing the most evil or whatever. It's more about this collective sense of lifting lifting the tide so that all of the boats are lifted with it. So I don't think that was a conscious choice early on, but it sort of became what it was later, and I had to make conscious choices about that as it developed. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I think it actually makes developing a setting much harder if everybody is on a baseline level. Most people want to work together. The thing that really, really hit me the hardest is something you said in another interview, is when you define an optimistic setting, it's like, yeah, the government is actually there to help you.
Mm-hmm.
And it's well, current events notwithstanding, but yeah,
Right.
I live in Germany, and I like to think that our government is not as horrible as others are, but still, I do only trust our own government only to a very, very tiny degree. And simply imagining a world where I will walk into any government office because I need help, and I am sure that to some degree I will get it, that was a real eye opener for me. So yeah, that is optimistic if I've ever heard one. So
Yeah,
would you
and
say there were any specific sources for that, or is just like, yeah, your inner optimist that you channeled into it?
um, I think I was just tired of Like there was, okay, here's one thing that does not make it into the Han cluster that I think influenced what it is, right? This is kind of what you're looking for,
Hmm.
which is there's so many shows out there, TV shows, it just drives me crazy, that portrays like the military and the government as the evil, like we're going to control you, we're taking over, you don't have any control anymore, and it's everything from Supergirl, which did that, which drove me nuts. I don't know if you're familiar with the show
I
Supergirl,
know it exists,
but
haven't seen it.
yeah, so there's elements of military coming in and taking over, of saying, Supergirl, we need to control you. We can't let you go off to your own devices. But also in Buffy, it happens. In all kinds of properties, this is a recurring theme that drives me nuts because I kind of believe in the at least the historical sort of rationale and culture surrounding the military, even if sometimes we make mistakes and sometimes we have to follow orders that are not good. I mean, this is a human problem. This is a thing. But at the same time, like I don't look at military soldiers as a bad thing. I don't see it that way. And so part of my rebellion against that is to say governments are not evil in the Han cluster by default. Everybody around, most people that you're going to come into contact with in the Han cluster are going to be friendly people. They're going to be there and they're going to be willing to talk to you and willing to explore things with you, right? And that's not usual in games, especially in the dystopic sort of everything's gone to hell and now we have to try to salvage what we can kind of games, which I love, don't get me wrong. But at the same time, I'm like, I want to do something different. And like you say, it's way harder to do that while also creating conflict in a way that's fun and makes it a game and allows you to do all the things you want to do in games, like strategic combat in Savage Worlds, which is super fun, or having dilemmas that you have to solve or whatever, or doing dramatic tasks, all those things. It makes it much harder. But if you can do it successfully, it can make the triumphs that you feel that much more poignant, if that makes sense.
Definitely. And it's something that I've tangled with myself when trying my hand at writing a plot point campaign. So far, I have half of a first plot point. But
Mhm.
I tried to do something kind of similar now that I think about it, because while I love cyberpunk as a overall setting, like low life, high tech, and struggle against oppression that you can overcome. I'm firmly in the camp. Yeah, it should be able to overcome it. That there
Mhm.
should be a payout at the end, that you've done something good, that you have reached a new point in your life and in the life of others where things are better. And in cyberpunk, there is a certain expectation of things still being horrible. So my approach is kind of a compromise. Like, yeah, you are
Yes,
create. My idea is you're going to create this small community of like-minded people, and within that community, things will be better. The world outside is probably still going to be horrible and shit because it's still cyberpunk at the end of the day.
yeah,
But there is gonna be something you can look back on, like, yeah, we did that. We created that. And because of that, the lives of many people are better now. And
yes.
wait, well, you just did that and just blew it up to a span over multiple planets.
I did. I mean, I love high stakes. And Han Cluster, part of the reason I've talked about it is like, you want to establish what the world is before you really realize what the threat is, so that you
Mm.
can really appreciate what the threat is, so that you have something to save, something to preserve, something that you don't want to lose, right? And it becomes the more you can immerse your players into that kind of feeling at the beginning of the campaign, the more they fight and really need to win at the end of the campaign.
Yeah, which is for which you have some interesting approaches, including the pre-gens, who we are gonna get later a bit.
Mhm.
But yeah, well, going back to the topic of conflict and overall conflict, like it's not that there are no conflicts in Han Cluster. For example, the Han Cluster and Earth, on speaking terms, there's trading, there's currency exchange because they are both now on the same currency system, thanks to somebody from the Han Cluster. I'm not
Yep.
sure there are a lot of people on Earth that are still rather grumbly about that. So was that always in there, or was there other, like, okay, so this I probably have to explain for the people who do not know Han Cluster. There is a split between Earth and the Han Cluster, and it originated from Earth being very resource starved, and at some point they decided, okay, we need to take care of ourselves, or we are not gonna make it. We cannot continue investing into building up the Han Cluster. So that led to a break, and that was many years ago. Like 200 years ago at this
Hundreds of
point?
years ago.
Hundreds
Yeah.
of years ago.
Over a little less than 300 years ago. Yeah.
So that has been mended over time, but there is still conflict. The gears are still grinding each other. And I wonder, was that always the idea for how Earth and the Han Cluster had okay? Did Earth and the Han Cluster always have to have a falling out, or is that something that came up over time?
No, it always was there.
It always was there.
So, yeah, from the very beginning, the very first few paragraphs that I wrote about the Han Cluster is like, we've discovered hyperdrive travel. Earth is going to consume itself to death because ecological problems and all that. And it just followed from what seemed like was going to happen to me. So I'm like, let's do a speculative idea of what might happen. And then we go to the Han Cluster, and then Earth decides, like you say, we can't sustain this anymore. We're dying, and we can't wait. And so they finally decided they're wasting their resources. They cut Edenic off. Basically, Edenic cut Earth off too, because they were afraid of what Earth might do. And so it just happened, and it was this break that happened that still is sort of, the ramifications of it are there 300 years later when the beginning of the game starts.
And that was
always the point.
And that was always not just a point, but that was or rather always something that would happen. It always you always had it planned in this exact circumstances, because I thought about, okay, how else could we make the Han Cluster be isolated from Earth, and then like some rather iconic sci-fi things like ion storms that from high Star Trek original series, and so yeah, we just can't travel back, and now everybody's isolated, and they have to fend for themselves. Was that ever a thought for you, or was it always going to be a conscious decision for Earth to break off?
Well, it's still there, because the distance between them is so great, and there's a speed limit in human space of 6 light years per day. So if it's 3,000 light years, that takes about 18 months for you to get from Earth to the Han Cluster. In addition to that, the communication issue early on exacerbated the problem, because communication was actually only slightly faster than traveling there. Until the Draxel communication system was developed, and that didn't come until much later. So that just exacerbated the problem. Like, this lack of communication, difficulty getting there, the dangers you faced going there, it created that isolation, or at least expanded it in a way, so that it wasn't easy just to go back and forth. It wasn't easy to do that. You had to commit, and they did commit, and then they said, well, we can't keep doing this. We made a mistake. And so they decided to break.
Communication is a really interesting point in this, because there is a sci-fi series I really love. It's more space opera, but it's called the Honor Harrington series by, what's his first name? I believe James Webber. Great space opera series, in my opinion. Like, a ton of books at this point, and I'm way behind. And they have a sort of space travel, like you can go into hyperspace, and that is really fast, but they also have wormholes where travel across vast distances is near instant. and they do not have communication that can travel as fast as spaceships, not even faster than hyperdrive. So if they want to alert somebody of an invasion or somebody has to jump on a courier ship and go through it to hyperspace to the nearest wormhole, into the wormhole to the core planets, and be like, yo, we are being invaded.
Yes.
So there's a specific
that
time.
was a whole thing in early on, because I was like, that's the communication thing is a critical aspect of Han Cluster. Again, connection, collective consciousness, all that, but that lack of having instant communication over light years of distance is a huge factor in early human development, at least in the Han Cluster history. And then that development of instant faster than light communication between Draxels with the Draxel communication system is a huge development that solves all kinds of problems that a lot of people like me and like the people who read sci-fi or just watch Star Wars don't think about usually, but it is a huge factor, and it becomes a very important part of the plot point campaign later.
I think that is something that is rather. It's easier for older people to think about this because we grew up in a world where the internet wasn't a thing. And if you wanted to reach somebody, you had to call them and hope that they were even home. So it's easier for people like us to extrapolate that to, if I want to communicate with somebody, I have to write a letter which has to get delivered. Even if, like, I'm 44 this year, so letter things were already mostly a thing of the past when communication really became relevant for me. But I can get into the mind space of that and realize how important and what a game changer communication is, and what an extraordinary game changer instant communication is. That's something that I don't think is explicitly mentioned, but the Draxel relays, are they, even from the Han cluster to Earth, that's real-time communication, right?
Yeah, so the Draxel communication using the Draxel relays is point-to-point instant communication. So a person with a Draxel to another person with a Draxel. There is no broadcasting this way. The broadcast has to happen at 20 light years per day, which is extremely slow, right? So, and that factors in, like if you're a ship in distress in the middle of the Han cluster, and you can communicate instantly with a particular person, but it's still a few days away from someone to get there, right? Or a day or two at least, right? And so that broadcasting a communication signal to any ship in the area requires you to use the slow stuff, not the instant stuff. So 20 light years per day, right?
Yeah.
So maybe somebody is within 20 or 40 light years, it's going to take 2 days to get there.
Exactly. You would always do both, because your friend can get things going, but maybe somebody else is close enough and will hear it in half a day, and then jump to. And now there's
absolutely
the dystopian writer in me again. So technically, your friend could in real time could hear you suffocate when okay, nobody's gonna reach you in time, and that's just that's horrible. Like there are dark sides to this.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And that's another thing I want to say is, like, the Han cluster, if these things stop working, and there are mechanics in the game that can make them stop working, you're in big trouble, because all of a sudden you're light years away from anybody, your hyperdrive is broken down. There is no way that you're going to be able to do anything, right? It becomes the horror that space horror can become. So you can run games like that if you want, right? But this technology, I wanted to create plausible technology that's explainable, so that you can have, like, this optimistic technology solves this problem thing, but also sometimes that technology is not going to work. And when it doesn't, that's when things get very, very serious.
Yeah, there needs to be the potential for drama in everything. It can't be like an I win button or the one size fits all solution for everything.
Yep.
So
and that's why I spent so much time developing that part of it, and also because it really is critical and instrumental in the way the plot point campaign works.
So how was it in the beginning, and what aspects of it did you maybe discard along the way?
The communication thing was not a thought in the beginning. So that came later, and I think it came alongside the X ghosts and the transhuman abilities and X bonding and how they can communicate. I'm like, well, how can everybody else communicate? And then it became I needed to have gear that was next base so that you could ghost travel with it. So you had it on you at all times. And that sort of merged with the communication system. So these Draxels not only hold your X gear for you, allow you to focus Next energy into X gear, but they also facilitate that faster than light communication at the same time. So this system, this Draxel communication system in the Draxels, is a pivotal, important, like game-changing human development in the Han cluster that you don't think is a game changer, but absolutely is.
It's
So
kind
that's
of
that it all developed sort of naturally.
it's kind of funny because the way you explain all of this is makes it really easy for me to relate to or correlate that the next architect who developed the Draxels and everything had the exact same thoughts. Like, we have this problem. How do we solve this? I have powers that can work with this. Let's tinker.
Yes, exactly. And I mean, she was a genius, right? And she there's things about her that are revealed in the plot point campaign as well. And part of the whole, again, everything comes back to connection and working together. Solving the problem, solving the blinding problem in the PPC is more than just the PCs doing their thing, which they need to do it. There's nobody else that can do it. They're the ones, but they need help, and they need help from people in the past who have figured some of this stuff out already. So it becomes a collective human effort over a couple of centuries that the blinding is solved. Not just the PCs meet and then we have a plot and then they do stuff and then they solve the problem. It's more like it's tied into the lore of the Han cluster, for better or worse. And I think for better, because if you engage with it, it just means that much more.
Yeah, so everything is really connecting everything, which is a very Star Wars thing to say. Like, the Force surrounds us, it binds us, it keeps the galaxy together. And well, in Han Cluster, that is the Nex, or
It
well,
is.
Nexus for long. And I believe you changed the name of it a while ago, like years ago. And I can't even remember the original name.
Yes, so it was originally called The Drift. And
Drift.
there were really two reasons that I changed it. One was that the name The Drift sort of implied that you're drifting aimlessly, right? That
Hmm.
there's nothing behind it, that there's no mystery to solve really. It's just the drift. And I didn't think it was very evocative. And so I finally decided I needed to change it. And that was a big change at the time because everything had been written with that, term, and I'd been talking about it and all that stuff. And I finally changed it to Nexus and then shortened it to Nex to be, because it sounds cooler. It sounds like something that people would do over time.
Hmm.
And not only is it more evocative, meaning like it turns into this whole, it's like the Nex, and then it spawns this whole X category of gear and weapons and bonding and all this stuff. And it grabs your attention more, but it also, the second reason is it's more descriptive of the actual phenomenon. And like the
Yep.
Nex is a nexus, and to explain more is to spoil too much. So you have to play to find out.
Exactly. Go join the Backer Kit campaign and throw more money at Tracy so she can make cool stuff for us. So, but
Oh,
what? So why the drift in the beginning? Do you remember where that term came from?
it really was just me saying, oh, that seems like a cool term. I mean,
Mm,
a lot of these things, when you're first developing a setting and you don't have any intention of actually publishing it, you just go with whatever you come up with, right? You don't
mm,
look it up, you don't think about it, you don't really think about how that interacts with things in terms of a published product. right?
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of things that happen when you're just brainstorming a setting or brainstorming a story or whatever. And then as you get closer to actually making it real and bringing it to fruition, some of these things have to change,
Yeah,
either
that's
because they, are referencing other properties you don't intend, or because they're just not quite right.
yeah. That's just a big difference between doing something for your table, as you said. Like if you make something just for yourself and for your group, there are a lot of things you don't have to think about because well, you are there to explain it and it's all in your head anyways. But as soon as you switch that over to I'm going to publish this, you have to formulate and write it so other people understand your vision for it. So yeah, that name
Yes.
change makes even more sense.
Yeah, and it was late. I was like, "Oh, I have to do it. I have to do it. There's no choice. I have to do it."
Yeah, killing. Sometimes you have to kill your darlings in the 11th hour, but everything comes
Absolutely.
together and is better for it. In this case, by simply changing a name.
Yep. Exactly.
Cool. So then the Han cluster consists of a few planets, and each one of those is very evocative and very, I dare to say, specialized in what it stands for. Like there is no filler material with the planets. Each and everything, or every planet and every moon, which is technically not a planet. Sorry, Pluto. Um, serves a purpose. So how many planets did you go through before you landed on those that exist now?
Well, I started to add them slowly. So at first I just had Edenic and Earth, and then Tract, which is the desert planet, and I think I had Onyx, which is the dark sort of shadow planet that doesn't have a whole lot of sunlight that penetrates it. But I didn't. I, here's what I didn't want, right? In theme with your podcast, is I didn't want planets to be ubiquitous all over the place, right? I wanted to find that balance between there are enough of them that they're out there, and that there's probably more out there that we don't know about, but they're not so ubiquitous that they just don't matter. Like we go to this planet, we go to this planet, we go to this planet, right? I wanted them to each have their own personality, like you sort of said. Whether it's Onyx and it's dark, it's shadow kind of world and artificial light, big huge artificial light cities, or and gilded rain and all this sort of ecological things that go along with it. Edenic, the garden, awesome, perfectly suitable to humans planet. Venin, which is basically a resource planet that's sort of really exploited.
Mm.
But there are people that live there and they have their own sort of really tough attitude about things. Or Shaste, which is like this jungle sort of steamy, heavy gravity, dense atmosphere planet, hard to live on, but still a lot of people live there anyway. And there's things that grow up out of these conditions that change the way the cultures are that live there.
Mm.
And so I wanted to sort of really dive into, let's have just enough that we see something different in every one of them, but not so many that they're just throwaways, like in Star Wars, where you can add a planet on a whim.
Yeah,
You know
where
what I
every
mean?
planet is based. I mean, that is kind of the same thing in Han Cluster, where it's a sci-fi trope. I forgot the name of the actual trope, but every planet is a single biome. Like there's a desert planet and it's only desert, and then there's a jungle planet and it's only jungle, and that is not a bad thing in itself because at some point you get to a level of detail where you would need to publish like a 500-page book about each planet just so you cover everything, and ain't nobody got time for that. But yeah,
No,
that's
yeah,
it's
yeah, yeah. I
yeah,
thought about that too, and I was like, well, I can't. Planets are huge. Like
yeah. Just look at Earth.
they deserve their own books. They deserve multiple books. But I have to simplify and make it a little bit smaller so that people can digest it. People can go there and feel like they understand it. And then maybe later I can expand, but I'd rather expand in different ways. So we'll see
Mm.
what happens.
So what is in there is basically what you came up with, and there are no planets where you at some point went, this isn't working, and just threw it out.
No, I mean, I changed some stuff about some of the planets. Like I changed, like Venom was always an idea, and like this venomous planet, basically.
Mhm.
But I had no idea what I was going to do with it. I just knew, I didn't know what its personality was yet. I knew that it was a planet, it was out there. But it took Daryl, my friend Daryl Hayhurst, who I've known forever, um, he says, I'm going to take this and run with it. So during the pandemic, he took us through a adventure that he wrote for Venom, which sort of gave me a lot of stuff to go on about a map for it and all this other stuff, and explaining what it was like there. And I'm like, great, fantastic. I'm going to steal this from you, Daryl. And he was totally fine with that. I stole it, and now that became the basis of what's in the book. But I didn't have an idea. Daryl gave me that idea, and I fleshed it out based on his sort of baseline idea.
I mean, there's a saying in creative circles: surround yourself with people that are smarter than you. And I wholeheartedly believe it. That's why I do interviews with people.
hmm Me too. I mean, I'm lucky to have Daryl, and I'm lucky to have Shane, and I'm lucky to have the people I have around me because they are smarter than me and they know better. And if you want to try to do something, you have people who know how to do it already around you. You're in pretty good shape.
Yeah, that's a really good starting point, and also as a starting point, and then also as a sounding board. So, hey guys, I came up with this. Can I please get a sanity check on that? Like
Yes.
I have a dedicated group of people on my own Discord server, whom I bounce ideas off and to go over my small products when before I publish them. And that's just, I can never thank those guys enough. I mean, they get free copies of it because that's the only thing I can really do for them. Just
Yeah.
give them the stuff for free that they help make, and everything I write wouldn't be half as good as it is. Not even that, probably, if I didn't have those guys. So yeah,
Oh yeah.
big props to all of you friends and helpers and supporters out there. We couldn't do what we do without you.
For sure. For sure.
Now, going into one of the coolest parts, for me at least, after Han Cluster is the pre-gens.
Wow.
So, did all of those exist from the beginning, or did you have some that didn't work out?
No, not all of them existed. So, and we can get into Haley a little bit. We're going to get into Haley, but she was an evolved thing that did not work out in the beginning, and it had to change. But as archetypes go, so I created 6 archetypes at the start, and we went through because that was the first art I did for the Han cluster. And so we went through several revisions. Dimitar Spazov did those, and he was very patient with me, knowing that they were archetypes and the first things that I was doing for the setting, to get them just right, to get them looking right, to get them carrying what's the stuff I wanted them to carry, and to next year reality on the T-shirt and all that other stuff. And so it was careful revisions to get them right, and then I created later 3 more, much later, actually, because as I developed the second arcane background, Draxel Tappers, I obviously needed an archetype for that. I wanted a robot that looked like a robot. I already had a sort of synth robot, but I wanted a robot that looked like a robot so that we had that, so that we knew we could play them.
Hmm.
And then I wanted, for my own thing, I wanted an Edenic cadet who was a homebody and naive and not sure how to become a security officer for the Edenic Protectorate. But her mentor, who she's got a connections edge with, basically says, go out into the Han cluster and visit all these other planets and see what life is like on the other side. You can't be a security officer unless you learn empathy. So I created her, and she's one of my favorites. I would love to play her in a game that I was playing in, but because she's a fighter, but she's trying to learn how to be other things too.
Which just
But yeah, and
loops
go
back
ahead.
to which just loops back to the whole idea of an optimistic setting. Like, she wants to be a security officer, so she wants to be in a field where hurting people may not be avoidable. And the first thing that her mentor says to her is, go out and learn how to relate to people. He's not like, here's a gun, go to the firing range because you're gonna need it. He's like, no, you're gonna learn how to empathize with it, or empathize with people.
Yes.
And that's,
Yes.
I
And
think this
because
small anecdote,
she's already, yeah, go ahead.
this small anecdote alone just carries so much of the feeling as I understand the Han cluster for me. That's incredible.
Awesome. Awesome. And then I have ally characters, right? And the ally characters include Haley. They include a guy like Figgin, who's a shyster and a compulsive liar, but yet he's still vivid and still an ally in the Han cluster. Figgin's ex-girlfriend, Vina Cloud, who kind of keeps Figgin in line. And there's a bunch of others. I've got 12 of them total. And you end up having the opportunity to play them briefly later in the plot point campaign, and I think it's really cool because you get a chance to shape their stories, and if you've done it right, if you've done it well, the players will have a good understanding of who these characters are before you get there, so they can step into their shoes and play them and try them on for a little while and contribute their stories to the Han cluster and how they got rid of the blinding, before going back to your main characters to actually finish the job, So I love all of those. And they can all be played as archetypes if you're willing to make changes to the PPC or you don't want to play the PPC at all.
So how many did you make that didn't make it in?
I'd say there were maybe 3 or 4 that I thought of that I was like, yeah, this is too... It's not Han cluster enough. Like it filled that niche of the common archetypes that you see in role-playing games.
The fighter, the
but
healer,
I wanted,
the backstabber.
Yeah, the fighter, the healer, the all those things were there. But I'm like, yeah, this isn't evoking the feeling that I'm looking for, or giving you the idea of what these characters are. So there were a couple that I took away.
Basically, don't make archetypes just for the sake of having the archetypes. They need to be linked to the setting. They need to do something for the setting. Otherwise, it's just filler material.
Yeah, and I think, and you can play a fighter. You can do all those things. It's just for the archetypes, I wanted them to be special. And I've got, of course, example archetypes in the book, like the aristocrat and some others that I actually didn't make or haven't made yet, or I don't know, I might at some point. But it gives you an idea of the things you can play. And in the book, I'm very specific about, look, try not to worry about whether you need to have fighting or whether you need to have a certain skill or whatever. Try instead to make a character that you can see inhabiting this world, because you're going to be able to use whatever skills you have, thanks to Savage Worlds, because there's not that many. You're going to be able to use them. Trust me. And try to create what you want rather than trying to create what you think you need. Because believe me, the setting will adapt to what you do.
The good settings always do. Like I ran for a table group, I ran the ETU plotpoint campaign, Degrees of Horror. And one of my players had just come out of a, 7-8 years epic campaign playing The Dark Eye. And I can't remember the exact conversation, but basically it was like, can we try something? I was like, okay, cool. What do you have in mind? I want to play the most useless character we can make in this system. And I'm like, boy, are you in for a surprise? Because we sat down and we tried, and it's just not how Savage Worlds works. He made a music major who sometimes did tests and support roles by playing trumpets and trombones. It's like, yeah, because you can do that in Savage Worlds. That's the beauty of the system.
Yes, yeah, it is, and I play suboptimally all the time because I think it's fun. I'll make characters that defy stereotype and are not good at the things that you think they're going to be good at, just because I enjoy playing that. But when I start to play optimally and we start to get serious, then Savage Worlds it doesn't allow you to create a character that's completely useless. It just doesn't. And
Yep.
even if you're rolling a d4 -2, you've got bennies, and in Han Cluster especially, you've got conviction if you need it, you know.
Mm.
So it's hard to make a character that's completely useless.
Cool. So yeah, we have already mentioned. Well, we've talked about plot point campaigns already. So yeah, the magnum opus of Han Cluster, the thing that ties everything in it together, the plot point campaign. How much of it did you have to throw away and rewrite before it became what it is now?
That's where a lot of rewriting happened. So I've run the plot point campaign in various machinations for years, for multiple groups. And at first, first couple times I ran it, I hadn't written it down yet, really. I just had a general idea of what was going to happen. And as you get closer, like we said, to publishing and getting to the point where you've got to create something that people are going to be able to follow, that a GM is going to be able to present, that that players are not going to get lost with because it's too complicated, then I started to change and morph and condense and simplify and do all those things you need to do in order to make a publishable product that people can play. And so I think it's better now than it was, but it also has compromises in it in terms of making sure that that you can follow it, because it's so easy to get caught up in convoluted plans and themes and all this other stuff that players just don't care. They're just like, okay, I'm tuning out now. Just tell me where to point my gun, and I'll point my gun in that direction and shoot the person. But I don't want you to do that. I want you to engage with it. So I had to make it simpler.
Yeah. Also,
So
there's
yeah, a
always
lot
the
of it.
danger. There's always the danger of just assuming other people will get it because it's in your mind. You understand it, so how can they not understand it? And
Yes,
jumping over that hurdle to putting yourself into the mind of somebody who doesn't know everything you know is a difficult thing.
yes, it is, and that's what playtesting reveals, right? So once you've got it and you've got a good, what you think is a solid written campaign, and you playtest it, that it brings out some of those things, the things that players don't follow, or the things that they don't engage with as much as you would hope, or whatever. And then you can go back to the drawing board and sort of, just make little tweaks to help consolidate or clarify or do whatever you need to do in order to hopefully bring that clarity to people so that they will engage with something beyond just what's the next fight,
Absolutely. Is there an example of something that you thought was great in the campaign and then absolutely didn't work out once it reached the table?
Yes. There was a point at which the campaign included benevolent aliens that were trying to help humans. And there was many subtle and not so subtle ways that they did this. And I realized after playing through the plot point campaign, especially in the latter stages, once we got to the end, I started to realize, and so did my players, that it's not a human story anymore. That all of a sudden we were manipulated, and we were helped by an alien species that doesn't really reveal who it is or why they helped us. And then the game becomes about them, right?
Yeah.
I got rid of that entirely. I cut it all the way out, and that meant a very large rewrite of the plot point campaign.
Yeah, I believe
I
that.
think
Wow.
it's way better now. I'm very much more happy with it now than I was, but there was some really cool stuff in there that I thought was really neat, that I killed. That it's dead now. It's gone.
I very much agree with this decision, like posthumously now that it has already happened, because I believe that there are too few science fiction products these days that just focus on humanity and us overcoming our problems by ourselves. I don't want to say that aliens always are a cop out for that, but there are so many stories out there where it's like, yeah, humanity and is fighting and everything is just the same, even though we now have colonized 3 planets in the solar system. And then the aliens show up and humanity realizes, oh, we need to be nice to each other because now there's a bigger threat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I hear you. I hear you. And the way that's something also that I was sort of trying to avoid. And so the threat, the blinding, what the blinding is, and it came about over years and years, but it's so, whether I like it or not, prescient to what's happening right now, that I'm sad about that. I'm very, very sad about it. But at the same time, like, well, this is it. This is the game, and it doesn't. I was asked in an email, like, how much allegory is there in the Han cluster? How much political allegory is there? I'm like, there's nothing intentional there. There's no outward or inward references to anything that's actually going on. But there's metaphor everywhere. And it was always intended to have that, always intended. But now it's so much more poignant than it was, just because the way the world is right now.
Yeah, a good metaphor can cover a lot of ground.
Yeah, and I tried to make it universal, and I tried to make it timeless, because I had no intention of saying this is this and this is this and this is this. I didn't want that. I absolutely railed against that. I wanted to speak for itself, to stand up on its own, and to be able to stand up 10 years or 20 years from now, wherever the world happens to be.
Well, to a certain degree, one could say a product is never independent of its creator. So to a certain degree, I'd guess your opinions, just like my opinions are in my stuff, will always be in there. But over the
Absolutely.
course over the course of many years, would you say you just filed down the serial numbers enough that it, even if somebody who knows you very well can pick up Han Cluster and read through it and not be instantly like, oh, this is Tracy's diary of how she would like the future to be?
I think not. I think you can't do that, right? And like you say, I think a game design is fascinating because it is totally reflective of the designer, whether you like it or not. You can't get away from it. And I'm proud of it. I'm proud of what Han Cluster is because it does reflect who I am. It does reflect my viewpoints, but in a way that I hope also, and because my viewpoint is let's listen to everybody, Han Cluster reflects that viewpoint too. So I embrace it. I lean into it and say this is a unique experience. I'm trying not to genericize this. I'm trying to make this special. So in that sense, that's why it's different, and that's why it's a little harder to access for people, I think, in terms of what is this about, until you actually start to read it. It's just the way it is.
Yeah, and that all just brings us back to who is your favorite pre-gen and why is it Haley?
So Haley, she came about later, but Haley Preston, for people who don't know, she is a Z kid. So she was made on Earth when Earth was going through its no one can have children phase, or you have to apply to be a parent phase, right? Because they were so overpopulated and so ecologically drowning, that she was made to be a surrogate child for parents who couldn't have kids. That didn't work out, as you might expect, right? It was a terrible idea, but at the same time, what comes out of it is Haley becomes a linked machine, the first linked robot in human space, and she becomes a heavily influential person and famous person in the Han cluster, for helping to get linked machines their rights and stuff. But more than that, she was built to be a 12-year-old, and she retains some of those childlike qualities, even though now she's 70 years old and quite wise. So she has a way of communicating that's unique and special, and she's endearing, and she's also a heroic character. So she's an ally character, but she's of heroic rank. She's got a D12 persuasion. She's got, she's got all kinds of edges. She's very powerful, but she's not a fighter. But I love her because I love the idea of her. A 12-year-old robot, or a robot meant to look 12 years old, who's actually 70 years old now, but retains some of those childlike viewpoints and expressions that she was built to have. And
Just
she
imagine,
changed.
just imagine a 12-year-old that had 70 years to refine her puppy eyes.
Yes, exactly.
That D12 persuasion is very warranted.
But also, there's also a bit of uncanny valley there. So, she does have a human face, but she has a robotic body. So people don't take her seriously, or they're scared of her at first. And that can get over that, but that's still a problem for her. And the original art for Haley, which was really cool, I completely discarded it because it was completely wrong. And I hesitate to even show what it was. It was cool and well done. The artist did a great job. They did exactly what I asked for. But I was like, along with my friend Dot Moore, who we and a little bit of Armistice, Jerry, we brainstormed a way to do Haley that made more sense, and that was much more. It was much more. And so the Haley that is there today is the product of that.
So the initial version of her always was the robot with the human face, but her design just went through a very drastic iteration, is what you're saying.
Yes, her design and how she dressed. Because I'm like, well, how would she dress as a 70-year-old robot who was built to be 12, right? Like, and Dot and I decided she would go sort of a goth direction. So she's got these tall, like heels, or tall shoes, like platform shoes a little bit, and she's got this constellation skirt. She's got a T-shirt that says live robot walking, or whatever it is.
Yeah,
and then established 2484 or 2584, which is when Haley ghosted. So I think that's kind of cool. It's like when she linked to the next is what she's got is established 2584 live robots walking. She was the first one. Exactly. And she was the birth of linked machines in the Han cluster, and she owns it. She owns it. And I think that's really cool. That's why she's my favorite.
Haley is a really interesting concept to me, because how she will appear at a game table, in my opinion, will rely heavily or depend heavily on the experiences of the GM who's portraying her. Because there are simply the difference between being a parent and not a parent. That's gonna be a heavy influence into how people run Haley. And me myself, I am not a parent, but I have met 12-year-olds that could debate me out of the room without breaking a sweat. There are some sharp cookies out there who are only 12 years old, and I feel like some tables might run the danger of underestimating Haley because it says she is built with the mindset of a 12-year-old. And well, I'll have to see how the actual writing for her then
right
is in
yeah
the book.
It's hard to say. It's hard to say. I know how I play her, but I'm fascinated to know how other people play her and how she's received and all that. I mean, I know that some people have used the term Pollyanna to describe the setting, and I don't agree with it. I don't dislike Pollyanna at all. Mind, I'm a big what was her name? Haley. It was Haley something. I can't remember her name, but she was big in Disney movies for a long time, and she played Pollyanna. And I like that movie, but that's not what the Han cluster is. Optimism is in the face of extreme adversity. In the Han cluster, and I don't want you to sort of. I feel like that's diminishing the setting using a term that really isn't what it is, but at the same time, it's not a bad term. Like, okay, if you take Pollyanna as it is, I'll take it. But if you're taking Pollyanna as the blanket term for something that Pollyanna isn't, then I get disappointed. You know what I mean? Because it's not that.
Absolutely, but that is one of the inherent risks when you write something and you publish something. The second you press that release button, it is no longer fully yours. Like
Nope.
other people will see it differently, they will run it differently, they will make it their own, which is one of the most beautiful aspects of our hobby. But it's also something that you have to make your peace with as a writer, as a designer, that some people will see your stuff in a drastically different light, and you have to be okay with that to one degree or another. Like I've
You
heard
absolutely do.
people do reviews of Spore Runners and were like, yeah, this is meh, this is mid. I'm like, yeah, and that is perfectly fine of you to have that opinion, because that's also because it was a review, like you explained where you came from. Like, yeah, I can absolutely see your point. Then it is probably not really that for you, but thank you for giving it the time that you did. That honors me, because you thought my stuff was good enough to even have a look at. So thank you for that. And I've taken some interesting tidbits of information out of that. Like every bit of feedback is valuable, even if the person sees the stuff you made in a completely different light.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
So speaking of different things, wow, what a segue. Let's go to the road not taken yet. You've already hinted at in other interviews that if you were to find really big success with Hahn Cluster, there are a lot of different other venues you would like to explore for the settings. So what is your number one thing you would like to do?
Oh, my number one thing. That's a tough one, because the Hahn Cluster plot point campaign essentially is a story of humanity's first contact with an alien race, right? And even though humanity doesn't necessarily know it right away, but there are others out there. And I think it might be fascinating to have my perspective on what humanity in the Hahn Cluster, as they are, the secure, much more secure and much more sort of evolved race that they are, what it would be like for them to be the ones to have to help somebody else. Or, I don't know, like that different experience. I'm all about doing what I don't see often. And so what that means for aliens and expanding out into the multidimensional universe, I'm not sure what it means yet, but I do want to explore it. But one of the smaller ones I want to do is bring the Olympics back to the Hahn Cluster. So it's been gone forever, right? Hundreds of years. And after the blinding is solved, and after some of these rifts that have plagued humanity for so long between Earth and the Hahn Cluster are mended a little bit more, I want to have an adventure, like maybe a 32-pager or something, where the group works to bring the Olympics to the Hahn Cluster and have Earth participate in it.
An interplanetary
Dumb?
Olympics. Damn.
Exactly. Stupid maybe, but I want to do it.
That's not stupid.
And then I also want to
awesome.
do a dark timeline. So what if you failed in the plot point campaign? What if you failed? I want to do what happens after that.
I mean, the Jumpstart you published, that adventure is not part of the plot point campaign, if I remember correctly, right?
No, it's not. It's independent of it. It's a really great introduction.
Yeah, but you can, if you fail in that, there are. I don't want to spoil the Jumpstart for anybody who hasn't played it, but you can fail. And if you fail, the consequences are dramatic and dire and absolutely horrible. So that is something that came out of Tracy's brain. And now I am very scared of what she could cook up if we were to give her like a plot point campaign hinging on another plot point campaign failing. That's
Oh,
a
I think it
scary
would be
thought.
so fun. Like it wouldn't be something that I would extend further, but I wanted to do a one time, right? Like what if you failed to cure the blinding? And there's an option for that. There's text of what happens when you fail. It's awful.
I
Awful,
assume,
Manuel.
yeah.
And then we start from there. And
Yeah.
part of the optimism of the setting is, well, the worst has happened. Now what do we do?
Yeah. Time
We
to pick
have to
ourselves
do
up again.
we have to pick ourselves up again. And I want to write that. I think that's what I would most like to write. Most people are not going to lose the plot point campaign.
Hopefully.
But this is an alternate universe where you did. You
Wow.
know.
I am scared of the premise, but dang it, I would buy that in an instant.
I
Because
think
yeah,
I
that
would love
sounds
it.
awesome. That sounds
Yeah.
really awesome. Cool. So, well, getting slightly back to the actual topic of, is there anything else you can think of that you removed from the Han cluster and that made the whole thing better?
Oh, there's probably a lot. I'm so in it now that I just don't remember all the things that changed. At some point, the X-Ghosts were completely incorporeal, for example. I didn't realize what I was doing was making a real-time and tangible real-world net like Cyberpunk. Like Cyberpunk, you run the net, right?
Mm-hmm.
Han Cluster, the net is part of reality.
Yeah, it's a bit like Astral Space in Shadowrun. This
Yeah,
parallel
right.
thing where you're basically splitting the group as soon as something happens either in cyberspace or in the astral space. In the worst case in Shadowrun, you have a three-way split of the party because the Street Sam is in meat space, the Decker is in cyberspace, and the Mage is dicking around in astral space. And yeah, good luck making something coherent out of that.
Right. And in this case, it's accessible to everybody, right? And that's part of the fun. So some of that, I don't remember. I don't remember some of the big ones that got cut besides the alien thing, which was a huge one. I don't remember. It's been so long. It's been so many
relate.
years. I don't remember.
Hey, even even what you just said, that the Nex used to be like a true parallel dimension that didn't interact with reality. That is a big thing. Yeah, definitely.
It did. It used to be, but then it's suddenly like, oh no, this makes sense. Let's bring it to reality, and then it went from there.
Then it's going to be like a new reality everybody has to adjust to.
Yes.
Nice. So one thing that would be kind of interesting to explore, I think, and that might be something that would be probably best explored in fiction and not even as a tabletop RPG thing, is some events that happened in the in-between times before the real-time communication, or just the actual events of the split between Earth and the Han cluster.
Yeah, I thought about that too. I wanted to go back in time and have a plot point for that, right? And even do a generational thing, like to say, here, this plot point happens at Hope's Break or around that time, but maybe in some way your ancestors now can play the Transcendence plot point campaign and relate to some of the people that, your history, your family history in some way. I think that'd be kind of fun. I don't know if it's publishable, but it's something that I could run as a GM anyway. But I think the past stuff, like if you really want to go back into where humanity was struggling, I think that could be fun too.
It sounds to me like you've made a canvas where a lot of stuff is painted in details, just brought it just enough details so you can play it. But then there is the backside of the canvas. That analogy fell apart really, really fast. But there is this whole area of the history of Han Cluster that you made evocative and super interesting. and that is just the building blocks to get to the actual part that you get to play. So exploring those parts always seem interesting to me if they are written as well as they are in the Han cluster. The danger I see with it is if you make it a plot point campaign, then how does that relate to the plot point campaign as it is in the future, or how,
Exactly.
or the present when Han Cluster was first published? It's like it's the Star Wars problem. Like when you start with episode 4 to 6, how do you make episode 1 to 3 without contradicting a lot of stuff or make it all fall apart?
Yeah, that is really hard. And but I think that the answer to that is much lower stakes, so
True.
that it's not as impactful on 300 years later. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I don't know. That's one way, but fiction is another way. I do want my first. I've already started writing fiction for Haley's life. What, for better or worse, right? Like, I love her, and just the first little bit I've written where she is starting to ghost for the first time, and she's talking to her parents, and her parents are deciding, without her knowledge, that they don't want her anymore. It's heartbreaking, but at the same time, it's kind of beautiful because you know where Haley ends up later.
Yeah.
You know what she becomes, and I think that's super, super cool. So I want to write that story.
Yes, please. Just make a new Backer Kit campaign or something for it so I can throw money at it. Oh God, that sounds amazing. Yes, please.
That's cool to know. I thought it was really just for me, but I really do want to write it.
You have a minimum of one person who would absolutely read the heck out of that.
Cool.
Cool. So that is all from my list, and I think we are doing well on time. So if you guys want to find the Han Cluster, you can do that on the official website, which is hancluster.com. There's also a Backer Kit campaign. Links to everything I'm saying now are going to be in the show notes below the video. There's a Backer Kit campaign that is, as of release of this video, still ongoing. It will be going for, I believe, 1 more week. There is a dedicated Discord server for the Han Cluster where lots of interesting people hang out and lots of cool stuff gets released, and Tracy gives us cool other tidbits every now and then. Then, of course, there is the podcast she does with Christian Serrano, Designing Problems. It's going to be a link to that as well in the show notes, as well as the Discord for said podcast, because there are lots of designers of all varieties of life in there, not just Savage Worlds. Like, we have people doing video game design and such that are there and chime in. Really great discussions. If you're a designer, you want to be part of that Discord. At least, like, I don't have that much time, but I'm passively reading most of what goes on there, and it's just a treasure trove of cool tidbits and information and support. Tracy, anything more you would like to plug to the good people out there?
No, I think you've done my job for me. That's all I've really got at this point. Like, you can go and read some of my old stuff, like Adventures for Savage Worlds I've written, like Disaster at Grand Atomica, or Teen Crush, or the Curious Death of Violet Evans, or the development work I've did for Holler or Pine Box Middle School. My fingerprints are all over those things. So if you're interested in what I do, those are good places to go.
You heard it here first, folks. Well, in case all that is left for me to say, Tracy, thank you so much for joining me today. It has been an absolute pleasure having you.
Well, thank you very much, Manuel. I'm tickled that you really are, that you're so enthusiastic. You're a cyberpunk person, and that it heartens me that a cyberpunk person would be interested in a game like this. So I know people are multifaceted. I get that, but to hear it and to see it makes me so happy. So thank you for having me, and thank you for being interested in my game.
You are most welcome. Well, then all that leaves me to say to all of you, take care, have fun, enjoy your games, and until we see each other again, whenever that may be, stay savage. Bye.